Hello and welcome to CoSM's virtual Bicycle Day celebration. I'm your host, Tyler James Berger. On April 19th, 1943, a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann took the first intentional dose of LSD and went on a bike ride that would change history. LSD went on to be used in hundreds of research experiments in the middle of the century, changing the way we thought about the nature of consciousness and its biological basis, and also ushered in the counterculture movement that characterized the 1960s. Now, we are living through a psychedelic renaissance, where we are reawakening to the tremendous potential that LSD and other psychedelic substances have for personal and collective healing. Today, we'll be exploring the legacy of Albert Hofmann and this mysterious chemical with Alex Grey and Allyson Grey.
Well, thank you, Tyler. Well, I was going to start off by telling the story of our psychedelic simultaneous experience that we had, and it's written right here in Sacred Mirrors by Alex and I in the preface of the book that we wrote in 1990. So here I'm going to read this. On June 3rd, 1976, we simultaneously shared the same psychedelic vision and experience of the universal mind lattice. Our shared consciousness, no longer identified with or limited by our physical bodies, was moving at tremendous speed through an inner universe of fantastic chains of imagery and infinitely multiplying in parallel mirrors. At a superorgasmic pitch of speed and bliss, we became individual fountains and drains of light, interlocked with an infinite omnidirectional network of fountains and drains, composed of and circulating a brilliant iridescent love energy. We were the light, and the light was God. It seemed as if the real material world was an illusory veil, now withdrawn, and the energetic scaffolding of causation and creation, the ultimate reality, eternal and infinite, was laid bare before and through us. All polarities were incorporated and transcended without conflict, past and future, microscopic and cosmic, male and female, self and other. Yet there was no extinguishment of awareness. Indeed, we each felt this state to be our purified essence. I was one particular point in the vast network, aware of my unique relationship with all points in the field. An infinite void seemed to provide the ground from which this lattice of light emerged. We both realized our vital connection with all beings and things in the universe, with God. We felt that death was not to be feared because the light was our spiritual core, and we would eventually return to the profoundly transcendent bliss of the lattice realm. Well, that was our experience of the universal mind lattice and the jewel net of Indra, I must say. So, but here we are on Bicycle Day celebrating this great moment in historic time. And why do we celebrate Bicycle Day, Alex?
Well, I think you succinctly summarized why we celebrate it and why it's so important to us and why we've been celebrating for the last 10 years with community for many years in San Francisco and now here at CoSM. And we've been telling the story of the discovery of LSD, which was really on April 19th, 1943, as you said. It turns out that, backing up a little prehistory, in 1938, Albert Hofmann was a research chemist at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals in Basel, Switzerland, and he's working with ergot alkaloids, and he is been trying them on animals and seeing if there's an effect for headache or for uterine contractions is what they're looking for, some kind of reaction with this ergot alkaloid. And so the 25th, he calls LSD 25. He tries it on animals. No apparent result. Puts it on a shelf. That was November 16th, 1938. So about 5 years later, in the middle of the war, on April 16th, it was a Friday, he hears the voice of LSD calling him. That's what he said. And it was also what he called a peculiar presentiment that led him to remix this particular molecule, LSD-25. Now, he had an experience that day that was inspiring his imagination, had many kind of a flood of visions and things, but for only a brief period. Now, he went back on Monday, which was April 19th, 1943, and at 4:20 in the afternoon, according to his lab notes, he doses himself with 250 micrograms, which is 250 millionths of a gram, very tiny amount. Nothing on earth is psychoactive at that amount, except he's discovered the one thing on earth that is active at that amount. And he's within an hour feeling like he's poisoned himself, and he's worried he doesn't want to die in the lab. And so the only way to get home is to ride his bicycle that he had ridden to work that day on. And so he takes off on a historic bicycle ride and through the town of Basel back to his apartment. Now he makes it back okay, and a doctor is called in from next door, and he's worried he's dying. Now, his spirit has left his body and things like this, and so the doctor is able to reassure him that he is not dying. His pupils are a little dilated, and he relaxes a bit and has some milk, I guess, so they say. And he began to recall some of the visions that were more pleasant, and he recalled his childhood, where he was out in a meadow and looking at all the flowers and all the sparkling sunny day, and he was thinking, like, everything's made of chemicals. I want to know about that. And so that kind of awakened in him this urge to unlock the magic in the understanding of chemistry. And his historic experience, his trip that day, really made a difference to so many of us. Certainly ourselves as artists, it inspired us.
Changed our lives.
Really
Totally.
did. And
But the name Bicycle Day.
That's true. Well, the reason we call it Bicycle Day is due to a fellow named Tom Roberts, who you recently had a conversation with.
Yeah, Tom Roberts is one of our featured guests on this program, and let's hear the story that he has to tell. On the occasion that April 19th is a holiday now known as Bicycle Day, which is a celebration that you started back in 1985. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of Bicycle Day and why you decided to make this a day worth celebrating?
Yeah, the idea just occurred to me. I don't remember exactly how or when, that we ought to have a holiday for psychedelics. And I was going to have it on April 16th, which is when Hoffman took his first accidental dose. But that was in the middle of the week that week and not a good day for a party. So I moved it up to the 19th and decided to call it his first intentional psychedelic trip. And that's the one that he really described in more detail. So I did it. There wasn't a sense of sort of feeling a need for this and then coming up with the solution. It just, the solution popped in my mind. I sort of made up reasons for it afterwards. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it just felt the right thing to do, and I did it. So I had no idea that it would catch on. I don't even know if I thought I'd have it in subsequent years. Probably, but I didn't know. I didn't pay much attention to it at that time because I really wasn't I was just getting together with some friends. And that's the way it started.
Now, why did you choose to call it Bicycle Day as opposed to like just LSD Day?
That's just what Albert Hoffman asked.
Yeah.
Well, somehow the idea of him riding a bicycle is more visual to me than, a sort of steady sort of drawing of a chemical structure. And also he talks about riding home and being accompanied, and I mean the chemical structure was sort of like there. But he asked the same question. He said, why do Americans focus on these side things like the bicycle day? A bicycle should be called LSD Day or something like that. And so he and I started a conversation or communications back and forth by actually written mail in those days.
Wow.
And so I explained to him that, I thought it was a better image and more active image. And also that, people could visualize somebody riding a bicycle more than just a sort of static chemical structure. And also, I thought of afterwards was that also the 19th of April here would be, or rather here would be the 18th of April, or 19th of April there would be the 18th of April. There's that famous poem by Paul Revere. "'Tis the 18th of April in 75, and hardly a man is now alive who remembered the famous day and year," and the midnight ride of Paul Revere. And of course, both of them were sort of revolution-starting events.
Mm-hmm.
And what would have been the 18th here would have been the 19th in Switzerland. So I told him, and he came around to it. He understood it wasn't just a matter of paying attention to the bicycle. I actually offered to buy the bicycle from him if he still had it, but he doesn't still have it. So,
wow, that would be quite the relic.
It really would. That's just what I thought. Yeah, but I'm sad he didn't have it anymore. That you say that would be a great relic to have.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are your?
Well, anyway, that's how it started, and I invited some friends over, and we had actually it wasn't a very sort of hippie wild day at all. It was we had people from their children with us from families, and we just hung out together.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is your opinion on how Bicycle Day has proliferated all over the world as this holiday for the psychonauts to come together and talk about the legacy of Albert Hoffman?
I am absolutely delighted. I mean, I had no idea it would catch on the way it had. One of my former students actually wrote the notice that I sent out to people, and I've sent it out ever since. I don't know, would have been probably 87, 88, something like that. And I said to the MAPS people send that out. So that got to a lot of people. And then I voted to friends, and friends sent it to friends. And I'm really delighted. Also, I'm a little annoyed by it because I consider my major work to be my books and my ideas in the books. But what's caught on is Bicycle Day. So there's the world for you. So at any rate, I'm really delighted. And each year, I pick up things on other places that are going on. I mean, like in Europe and all over the place, they have Bicycle Day. So it's really very gratifying to see that. So I guess, my ideas may be very good, but what my real contribution is going to be Bicycle Day.
So there you have it, the story of the first Bicycle Day and why it was called Bicycle Day in the first place. I thought it was interesting that Albert Hoffman had wanted it to be called LSD Day, but Tom Roberts was like, no, the bicycle is actually a little bit more of a concrete image.
Yes, well, it's a secret symbol that psychedelophiles recognize what it means, where, if you're not a psychedelophile, you may have heard of LSD and it may have a pejorative meaning, but bicycle, that keeps it kind of under the radar.
Yeah, I think that was it's kind of an amazing coincidence that on April 19th, actually, America had an important holiday they called Liberty Day. And because of like Tom was mentioning Paul Revere's ride on April 18th. So the next day then becomes Liberty Day. That's the revolution begins. And so it's an interesting coincidence, you know.
To kind of look at Albert Hoffman like the Paul Revere of psychedelics, you know. The hippies are coming, the hippies are coming. Now, next, well, we just heard about the origin story of Bicycle Day, but now we get to hear a little bit about the present state of research into LSD from Rick Doblin, Executive Director of MAPS. Let's hear from him now. What is the current state of the scientific research into LSD, and what are the most promising directions for it in the future?
Well, there has been Matthias Lichty at the University of Basel has continued the work after Peter. So what Peter Gasser has done after we finished the study with LSD with Peter to sort of break open the research, for the first time in about 30 years, is that the Swiss medic has given them permission to give LSD and MDMA to their patients on a compassionate basis. So Peter Gasser has switched to working with people on a compassionate basis. Matthias Lichty at the University of Basel has continued controlled studies, controlled research into LSD and anxiety. And so that research has continued in Switzerland. But what's happened now is both potentially hopeful and potentially disturbing, which is that there's a for-profit company called Mind Medicine that is traded on the stock market in Toronto. It's the first sort of publicly traded psychedelic thing. They have bought data and they claim to have gotten some patent rights from Matthias Lichty for LSD for anxiety. So what I'm worried about is that they will make overbroad patent claims. There's no way that they can patent LSD for anxiety. We started the study. Everything we do is in the public domain. What have they done that's unique about it? But I worry that we've got the for-profit people now looking at LSD for anxiety, and they may try to block other people from doing research, and they don't know what they're doing. They're just really a stock market play. They don't have their internal capacity to do research, so that's why they're buying things. They're also trying to make a big deal about 18MC, which is the non-psychedelic ibogaine that they're trying to develop. But in any case, the hopeful side of it is that they will actually put a bunch of money into developing LSD. It's not clear to me really what their sort of financial analysis is. What is their business model? For us, and I'll say this for MDMA, and it's also true for them for LSD, if you're the first to make a drug into a medicine that's off patent, in the US, you get, it'll end up being around 6 years of data exclusivity. Nobody can use your data to market a generic. They can make their own data, but they can't use your data. In Europe, it's 10 years. So for us, that's enough. I mean, we would develop it even if there was nothing like that, because we're doing it nonprofit to make it available to patients. But for a for-profit company, that might be enough to have 10 years data exclusivity in Europe, 6 years in the US. Hopefully they will see that and not try to make overbroad patent claims. But in any case, we'll have to look at Mind Medicine to see what they're going to do with LSD. And they're the only people now really trying to develop LSD into a medicine for a psychological illness. There's been a bunch of people interested in LSD microdosing studies for creativity. There's a fellow named Shlomi Raz that started the Elucis Benefit Corp. And their first study for LSD for creativity failed in terms of microdosing. And their explanation was that there's such a background rate of creativity in the control groups that it's hard to show a difference. And they've now switched to looking at LSD and other substances for inflammation, and maybe that they can have an effect on Alzheimer's or other kind of inflammatory disorders. But I think there's a small study in New Zealand looking at LSD for microdosing for creativity or depression. But in general, for psychiatric indications, I'm much more sympathetic with the idea of macrodosing than microdosing, because what we really want to do is make people free of drugs. We want to make them free of the depression. We want to not just control symptoms. We want to get to the core root of the problem.
And cure it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I think microdosing is a valuable option for people. And if it helps and people don't want to do a macrodose to work through, then they should have that available. But I think at least for now, both the rest of the investor money and the philanthropic money is going more into psilocybin than into LSD.
Now, we touched upon LSD being looked at as a treatment for anxiety, there are people asking questions about whether or not it can do things like enhance creativity. But from a therapeutic context, what are some things that make LSD unique in its therapeutic potential? Certain applications that LSD can uniquely have that other psychedelic substances aren't being applied to as much?
That's unclear. So it's, we're seeing that psilocybin is working really well for depression. We've got two studies, two companies got breakthrough therapy designation, one Compass for treatment-resistant depression, the other Usona for major depressive disorder. We're seeing psilocybin being effective for addiction, for dependence on alcoholism. So in the 60s, you mentioned Stan Grof and the work, they did two areas. They did LSD for alcoholism and heroin addiction, and they also did LSD for anxiety and depression from end of life, from cancer patients facing end of life issues. So all of those have been looked at with other psychedelics. So I think that there's, you can think of psychedelics as like a rainbow, like they're all different colors, but they're all part of the same rainbow of psychedelic effects. So to say that one has unique properties that other doesn't, I'd say ibogaine has, it seems like a unique property for helping people withdraw from opiates. It's not clear to me that we could say there's one disorder that LSD is ideal for that nothing else would work for. So for example, the first work in the whole world of psychedelics for PTSD was with LSD. It was a Dr. Jan Bastiaans in the Netherlands, and he did work for what he called concentration camp syndrome. So this was shortly after World War II and up into the 80s. He was the last person in the world to still be able to give LSD legally. When everything else was shut down, Bastiaans was still giving it for concentration camp syndrome. And a lot of the Dutch people that were in the camps were not just Jews or gypsies or homosexuals, but also were Dutch resistance fighters. And a lot of them then became part of the Dutch government, and they protected this work. But LSD for PTSD is very difficult. It brings things that have been buried to the surface so that you can work with them, but it doesn't reduce the fear the way MDMA does. So I think that for PTSD, we would ideally start with MDMA and then go, if people are interested, to a sort of a classic psychedelic. But I will say that LSD has remarkable therapeutic properties. We had one donor who left us about $600,000 in his will, and he was interested in LSD. And so I went to Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins, and at the time they were doing their phase 2 studies with psilocybin for end-of-life related anxiety. And I said, let me fund an LSD arm of the study, and you can compare LSD with psilocybin. And in the end, he said he didn't want to do it. And his reasons were that LSD lasts longer than psilocybin, so that it would be more difficult for the therapists. Psilocybin is more embodied. Sometimes people get nauseous, but it's a little bit more embodied. LSD is more sort of mental, ethereal, and so it's a bit more challenging in that regard. And then he said it's way more controversial, LSD, than psilocybin. So, and he said that he thought the differences in therapy would likely to be relatively similar, not so much difference between LSD and psilocybin, and that to find a difference, you need to have very large studies, because the smaller the difference, the larger the number of subjects you need. So my sense of it was, no, we don't care about statistical significance. We just want your clinical impressions. But in the end, he decided not to do it. So there's never been like a head-to-head test of LSD versus psilocybin. So I think, though, that LSD's got tremendous, tremendous value. And Although I wouldn't say that there's a unique patient population that's ideal for LSD that doesn't work for psilocybin or ibogaine.
And there we have it from Rick Doblin. I was looking forward so much to asking him what makes LSD unique, what makes this special and different from everything else. But his answer I loved so much. It's like he said all psychedelics are like a rainbow, colors on the rainbow. It's a spectrum of effects where they have their differences, but they all interlap in some way or another. I thought that was really amazing.
I agree, and it's amazing how Albert's been part of establishing that, and his discovery of psilocybin as well as LSD, the comparison of those two, it's really fascinating, and their, the importance of their interaction with the brain, Now, Rick is such a
excuse me,
friend
but no,
right now.
Rick is a genius, and we are all very grateful to Rick, who has spent decades, a lifetime, just doing exactly what he's doing for us because of his experience, the value that he got from the psychedelic experience. He felt he needed to bring it into legitimacy, and he's been working towards that. It's brilliant.
Well, Maps has been an old friend of CoSM as well,
right.
and
They had we had our first event of an outside group besides CoSM was with Maps. They rented CoSM NYC just to help us out and had a great time.
well, Rick has been to the Bicycle Day celebrations that CoSM has held in San Francisco. Oftentimes, Maps will have a symposium, a group, a psychedelic kind of get-together, and it will overlap that time, and we'll all get together and have kind of celebration of this and recount the story and bond as a community.
The Maps Psychedelic Bicycle Day party is ongoing today.
It is ongoing today.
Tonight.
So yeah, check it out.
So thanks again for Rick for that amazing offering. Next up, we have Dr. Julie Holland, who's going to tell us a little bit about the psychopharmacology, what's going on inside the brain when we experience oceanic oneness, something that is very common to the psychedelic experience. Let's hear from her now. What are some of the qualities of the LSD experience that to you are the most mysterious from a psychopharmacological perspective?
Well, I think as I hardly know where to start. So as someone who has had some personal experience with these intense altered states, and as somebody who has witnessed them in others quite a bit, the one that I sort of hang my hat on that I am most interested in is this idea that sometimes when people are peaking on psychedelics, they have this sense that everything is connected, that not only is everything connected, but that whoever is doing the tripping or the experience is fully jacked into that experience. Everything is connected and I am a part of the connection. And this sense that there is sort of a universal, I believe Alex Grey sometimes will call this like a universal lattice work, of energy that connects everyone and everything. I think that when you're in this heightened altered state, you can be really clued into that reality, that everything really is connected, and that a lot of our sense of illusion, a lot of our sense of separation is really an illusion or just constructs that make it easier for us to understand things or see things. So this idea of oneness, which is a part of a mystical experience, you can get that sense of oneness and of belonging and of connection without LSD. So I've spent the last few years researching this idea of connection and sort of looking at the science of connection and the pharmacology of connection and what is really happening chemically when we have this sense that everything is connected or that we are connected to everything or that we belong. And I kept coming back to oxytocin as being one of the sort of chemical foundations of this sense of connection, of bonding, of trust and belonging. And there's lots of natural examples of oxytocin being increased, for instance, in let's say a woman who is nursing or breastfeeding a baby. That's a very high oxytocin state. Childbirth is a high oxytocin state. Orgasm, which some people would say has something to do with bonding and connection and trust and oneness. Orgasm is a high oxytocin state. So I was looking to LSD and other classical psychedelics and trying to figure out, okay, so where's the oxytocin? I mean, clearly these are states of connection and bonding and oneness. Where's the oxytocin? But I couldn't find any papers that said LSD increases oxytocin. But what I finally learned, actually about a year ago now, I was right before I was going to give a talk at Esalen. And that morning I got an email from a researcher that I had been in touch with, a woman named, I don't want to get her name wrong. Her last name is Schellenkrantz. And I believe her first name is Heidi, but I'm afraid it may be Helen. But I'll get back to you on that. Anyway, and the notes for this conversation are in a book that I'm coming out with soon that I'll mention in a minute. Anyway, what she taught me is that there's actually a situation where the 5-HT2A receptor, which is what I like to think of as a psychedelic receptor, right? We know psilocybin, LSD, they tickle this 5-HT2A receptor. They're agonists for it. And but it turns out that that receptor creates a bonding pair with another receptor. It creates something called a dimer. It dimerizes. The 5-HT2A receptor dimerizes with another receptor when it is stimulated enough. And lo and behold, that other receptor that it couples with is the oxytocin receptor. So there is this sort of crosstalk or bleed through where in psychedelic states, you do have an increase of oxytocin. And actually where you see that most clearly is with MDMA. And now MDMA is not a classical psychedelic, and MDMA does not yet have its own bicycle day. So that is a bit of an aside, but I will just say as an aside that we know that MDMA markedly increases oxytocin levels and gives people that sense of openness and trusting and bonding. And I will say one more thing about openness and trusting and bonding, and the sense that we're all connected and we're all in this together, is that is often something that is really missed from today's politics. And something that many of us would like to get back to is this sort of transition from me to we, and let's make sure everybody has what they need and not just certain people have what they need. And that is really all about oxytocin. And sharing. And I think, and something I wrote about in this book that I'm coming out with soon is that we can talk about psychedelics and government, and we could talk about psychedelics and ecological activism, say, or just eco-consciousness. Many of us who have had altered states where we feel everything is connected, one of the things you come away with from that message is that, we're connected to the earth and we are part of the earth, and nature is a part of us, and you can't separate humans from plants and animals, and that we need to take care of the earth. And I think a lot of us who have had altered states feel very strongly that we need to take care of the earth, and that how we treat the environment really matters, and the sort of environmental consciousness that gets fed by our mystical experiences. It's important for our evolution. It's important for government.
Wow, amazing information there from Dr. Julie Holland. It's so interesting to hear about the chemistry that's happening in the brain. She's just so knowledgeable on that whole subject. And her book that's coming out, it's called Good Chemistry. That will be attached to the full interview that we'll be releasing later on cosm.org/live. Yeah, what an amazing drop from Dr. Julie Holland.
Yeah, she is such a genius practicing psychiatrist, but also she has the most amazing array of books. She's an author of Midnight at Bellevue, and then the pot book is hers. The MDMA book is hers, and then my favorite title, the Moody Bitches. I like that one. I really love that title. And now, what's the title again? Let's say it again.
Oh, Good Chemistry.
Good Chemistry. I'm very interested to see that. She's a wonderful author. And she is an incredible wife and mother. And we have a video, a home video that she and her family, the Family Mojo, made. So go to the website and see the full interview and the video of the family.
Song White Rabbit.
Of the
which
song
is
White
very
Rabbit.
apropos for a discussion about psychedelics.
Exactly. It's crazy.
She's amazing.
She is amazing.
Yeah.
What a doll.
Love you, Julie.
We love you,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Next up, we have Amanda Sage, a friend of CoSM, to tell us a little bit about how the psychedelic experience has influenced her as an artist. Let's hear from her now. Now, you are a mystic visionary artist and one who has been deeply inspired by the kinds of experiences that substances like LSD can induce. And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the psychedelic experience and how has it personally inspired your path as an artist?
That's a lot.
It's a big question, right?
Right. That whole realm of questing, of questing. I mean, that's what I feel like it is. You know, it's something that is that I guess mirrors back to us the absolute majesty of the reality that we're in, and we forget so often, you know, like it's such a mystery. It's such a miracle what this existence is when we look deeper into it. And I think that it's only visible to us when we really take the time to look, and sometimes we have to strip down the conditioning, you know, the conditioning of all of survival, of being a human in this realm with an identity and with responsibilities and all of that. The psychedelic experience is something that takes us beyond the mundane, takes us through it and into it, where we see the mystery, we see the infinite in everything. It becomes visible to us. And then not just visible, you can feel it through every aspect, every detail of your being. And I feel like we're all, we all have this access. I mean, we dream, even if we don't remember our dreams at night. You know, we go into these lucid states that, you know, sometimes through a sickness or through deep grief or great joy, there's sometimes this, the veil thins. And the psychedelic experience, that realm is even, you know, it really exposes itself through certain substances. And humankind has been obsessed with this since the beginning of time, obsessed with either exploring it or trying to hide it, right? Because, yeah, I mean, are people that really see the great mystery, are they as easy to control? You know, I think that might be a big part of it. But we're at a time where, you know, in the past 50 years plus, and I haven't been around that long, but the research and the opening of that mystery and that history, the psychedelic history, has become something that more people have had access to. And so in relation to art and how it's affected my work, and I didn't really have a concept of what it would offer to me, or it wasn't until I was around 27 when I first had my really deep psychedelic experience. And I had, by that point, I had studied painting. I had studied classical painting in Vienna, Austria, with this amazing artist, Michael Fuchs, and had gone on to work as an assistant for Ernst Fuchs, who is his father, and a very famous and one of the godfathers of visionary art, as Alex Grey will point out. And he was a great mystic, and he was a psychedelic artist, although I didn't really know that so much at the time. His son wasn't as interested in those realms. But it wasn't until, so it was some years in of being an assistant, and I felt the pull. I didn't have that many people in my circle, though, of influence and friends that were investigating those realms. And so I made a prayer. I felt like it was the time, and so it was a very beautiful experience, my first experience, with wonderful guides and support, which is so important. You know, the setting, to be ready for it, you know, and to be open, because what is it going to show you? Oh, we don't know. But if you go into it with an open heart and with a real curiosity, and to ask for the gift to be revealed, what I saw was something that I knew and had seen when I was a kid, but I had forgotten. And it was kind of like I saw the energetic fields. I saw the electricity between the stars, you know, in the great cosmos. I heard a small, tiny little bug fall from one little leaf to another, and I heard its wings hit the petal of the leaf, and I was amazed at how this was revealed to me. And so through that, knowing that, you're kind of like, okay, an experience like that, how do you paint it? Good question, you know? But it was really a feeling and something that evoked a kind of bravery, maybe. Like I felt more brave to also trust the unknown, And that's something that came to me through really watching Ernst Fuchs paint, and to watch him not know what was going to happen next. Like I knew that he didn't know, and he wasn't afraid, and he was so curious. He would just keep going and keep going. And so remembering that, all those hours of watching him paint and, listening to his influences, I realized how much of it, was connected to this space that was available to us all, but we had to open ourselves to it. You have to invite it. And so as an artist, it's an opportunity that you have all the time. Every time you approach your work, you have an opportunity to become a channel in some way. And it's up to you, though, to make space for it and to invite it. And so what are you inviting? You just invite anything? Or do you have like what's your prayer? And so I think that is at the core of any artist's work. There's some kind of prayer there. There's an intention, but what is it? And so this is the thing, good, bad, whatever it is, what's the primary interest? What rabbit hole do you want to go down? And let it be revealed. So to me, art is a psychedelic experience.
Thank you so much to Amanda Sage for that kind of glimpse into her journey as an artist. I thought it was really amazing when she said, speaking to her first psychedelic experience, she experienced that and asked herself, how do you paint that? That's the question that all visionary artists ask themselves,
I know, and I think it was great that she was talking about her own kind of mystical experience or feeling of connectedness with the insect she could see and everything, and this overwhelming sense of unity and connectedness. That's one of the things that, like Julie talked about as well, and certainly that's the thing that is the healing thing, like in all of Rick's and Maps's studies, it's all about getting to this point of the mystical experience, you know, where you sense your connectedness with everything. And so that is a magical turning point in people's lives.
Yeah. Amanda's so important to us. We love her so dearly, don't we?
She is incredible. I'd say that she brings the lineage of the visionary artists that, like Ernst Fuchs, she studied with the Fuchs family, and she brings the connections of the European visionary tradition and the Misch technique, this very special technique that Ernst worked out, and to bring this kind of oil painting and tempera mix that brings out the jewel-like qualities, takes advantage of the transparent glazes and things like that that can enhance the jewel-like qualities that are really part of the psychedelic experience, and that Ernst Fuchs was really the first to masterfully portray in the 20th century. He made a breakthrough, I think, and I think was really kind of the founding granddaddy of the visionary artists that were pointing to this psychedelic realm with a kind of hyper-real approach that had never, I think, been done successfully before Fuchs.
But getting back to Amanda.
Yeah, so with Amanda, really, so she carries the wisdom of that lineage with her, and she was born, get this, on April 19th.
Oh,
so this is her
birthday, Amanda.
Happy birthday, Amanda.
Isn't that great?
Right. So great things were born on this day.
That's right.
And so Amanda not only has trained herself as a remarkable artist and has been teaching all around the world, teaching. She's got a whole army of visionary artists that she has trained. Luckily, she has been teaching classes here at CoSM.
Yes,
and so
every
she's
year.
one of the magi here, that one of the master artists that has been teaching year after year. She's also on the board here at CoSM.
Yeah.
She's a board member, and so her advice, her wisdom, her guidance and reflection as being a solid member of the visionary art community has really been a terrific association for us. We're so grateful to Amanda Sage. And she also, I want to say, has been doing something remarkable in this particular time. During the pandemic, this is a time of sequestration for everyone. And so people have been looking to many artists to have inspiration for their own creative lives that are now they're looking inside of themselves. How do we process all these feelings? Artwork's a great way to do that. And so she has a nonstop vision train art studio kind of workshop thing where artists from around the world have been helping maintain this live kind of interactive work with artists from around the world. It's really a remarkable offering, a gift from this remarkably gifted artist.
When I was listening to her, it was so wonderful to hear her talking about her first visionary experiences with psychedelics, and it called me back to my first psychedelic experiences when I was 17 and 18 and experiencing, mescaline and LSD and psilocybin and actually MDA, and I was having amazing sort of recreational experiences that were very evolutionary, climbing mountains and being with friends and going to parties and things like that. And I know I was thinking a lot and evolving a lot, but it really was LSD that changed me into a spiritual person. I mean, I never thought of myself really, as anything other than maybe an agnostic. But then when I read Be Here Now, Ram Dass suggests that, that we take LSD in a dark room and have an inward journey. And I had never, in 3 years of doing a lot of experimenting, ever given that a thought of going into a dark room by myself and having an inner experience. So when I did that, it made me present to secret writing, which was wafting through the air and flowing over all surfaces. And the writing was ineffable and untranslatable, and no sound was associated with it, but rather light. And it was basically, and I understood that it meant the language of creative expression. It was what God speaks to us through, and how we speak out into the world in the voice of God, like the divine comes in and we manifest out in the world. Our thoughts become things. So that's what I was remembering, and how I was about 19 when I had that experience. And immediately I read further, and Ram Dass said, go find a spiritual path, like start meditating. So I went and I found Yogi Bhajan, and I joined a community, and I went to Provincetown, and I went to meditate when I was 19. I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't very good at it, but I knew that I had become a spiritual person, but it was very, very hidden, because there was a lot of stuff by spiritual people against LSD, and there was a lot of LSD people that were against spiritual. I don't know what it was. There was a lot of the people that I was hanging out with, the political people that didn't want to hear about God, and I had contacted God. To me, that was like, that is what people call God. I know it's just a word, it has 3 letters, but that is what they're talking about. It's that field of light that is everywhere present, but is secret to us until it's revealed. So 3 years down the road, I kept this secret and continued to make art about secret writing, but I didn't tell anybody what it was about. I didn't tell anybody that I had the secret writing experience in LSD. Even my review boards, nothing. I just made this art about it and didn't tell them. Then you showed up at my party in Cambridge, and you took LSD for the first time in my apartment. And I took it too. It was the same LSD, the same friend who shared it with us. And that was your first experience with LSD. 6 years later, I found you.
That's right. I was initiated in your apartment.
You were?
By our teacher. And it really gave me it was a literal turning point, because it was a tunnel I was going through inside of my head. And so this tunnel going from the dark toward the light gave me direction. I felt like the light was God, and it was everything good and all of my questions to be answered. Just that morning, I had basically made my last-ditch prayer to God that, I think I need a sign in my life to show me a reason I should go on living, because I was so depressed.
But did you believe in God when you said that?
Not at all. But I just in case, you kind of want to give it the last shot as if you're going to throw in the towel, If you're out there, show me a sign. So I put it out. It was kind of a half-hearted prayer, but I guess there was a lot of something in there. And I think that God showed up, and it was through this LSD experience that basically we shared, and that turned my life around. I met God that night. That meant, okay, there is a God, and there is a purpose, and love has a lot to do with it. And so don't give up, basically. It was an affirmation for me of life. And of course, I never went there again. It was kind of like I needed to play hide and seek with God. I needed to know that there was a divine intelligence at the root of everything. And there was an affirmation in that experience. And then I met God in the flesh in the form of Allyson, and I saw your secret writing in your batiks and things like that, and I could tell immediately that that was from tripping.
I know, and you pointed it out to me. It was like maybe our second day together, because we never left after that.
No.
We really didn't. And but the second day I pulled out all my art, and you saw the secret writing, and you said, this is really important work. And I had been kind of doing something else and kind of keeping that secret. And so you said, no, this is really important work, and it became my work for life in many ways. I mean, I have Chaos Order and secret writing. And really, all of my art and all of your art has been informed by our psychedelic experience. And well, let me ask you this, Alex. What do you think, how has psychedelics changed you? What value have you gotten from them? I feel like it changed me to a spiritual person, first of all.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah.
Absolutely, me too. And that gave me a reason to want to go on living.
We call it God contact.
Yeah.
It's like no contact and then contact. And it was very specific, and a lot of people do describe it. And certainly Moses, saw the burning bush, and Barak, floated through the seventh heaven on the back of a mule. I mean, people have these epiphanies on and off of psychedelics, but in the altered state of consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. These are the mystical experiences that turn people's lives around and are the turning points in religious epics. And
right. We have this painting here, for instance.
These paintings, which are kind of give an iconic representation to the honored Albert Hoffman. It's really his day. And so I feel so grateful to have been inspired through a number of people to create these paintings of Albert Hoffman. And the first one was done and was exhibited in 2006, I believe, at his 100th birthday. And that was in Basel, Switzerland. And there was a symposium that was held at that time that brought thousands of people from around the world. And this painting is called St. Albert and the LSD Revelation Revolution. And and then I later did a painting called Albert Hoffman and the New Eleusis. And it shows another phase of Dr. Hoffman, the elder Hoffman. And here we have, in both paintings, a rendition of the LSD molecule. Here it looks a little bit more like a subway map or something. And so in this painting, we've got a reference to something that became of interest to Dr. Hoffman after his bicycle ride, and he became kind of famous for this discovery of the psychedelic, which they didn't even know what to call it, the psychedelic. And so that, in fact, came about and is memorialized here in a exchange between Aldous Huxley and Humphrey Osmond, who was a psychiatrist up in Canada and happened to give Aldous Huxley his mescaline, on which he based the Heaven and Hell and the Doors of Perception. And so they were going back and forth talking about, they weren't happy with the name, that the psychotomimetics were called, or the hallucinogens, because they didn't really think that they were making you hallucinate, So they were trying to come up with a more classic term, and it came about from Humphrey Osmond's turn of a phrase, to fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic. So this combines the psyche, the mind or soul, and delos, which is to dilate. And so to expand the mind is really what it refers to. And so it's always been an appropriate term. I think that, of course, there are other terms to describe it. I think entheogen is a wonderful term as well, But this Blue Hoffman has many features, and like the other painting, has a lot of the personalities that are seen and recur throughout this kind of telling the story of psychedelics. One of the things that Dr. Hoffman became very interested in was the idea of Eleusis, and what was the psychedelic at the basis of Western civilization. So he wrote a lot about and talked with classic scholars about this matter, and he traveled to Eleusis as well. It's really about the Eleusinian mysteries that were the civil religion of Greece. They were a kind of agricultural myth that was involving Persephone and Demeter and her kind of seasonal sojourn down to the underworld, abducted by Hades and kept underground, and then in the springtime, Persephone springs out. This is her time when the blossoms return to the earth and all the flowers appear and everything like this. This is the identification of the human beauty and fecundity, with the nature field. And so Persephone and Demeter taught humanity agriculture. Agriculture is the basis of civilization. It means that the nomadic tribes can stay put in one place, and by their agriculture, they can build a civilization and start to build temples and things. So this is what gave them their power, was the wheat fields all around the temples of Eleusis. And in these fields were harvested sometimes grains that may have had ergot growing on them. So as we heard earlier, LSD comes from a basic kind of alkaloid of ergot. Ergot to mean tartrate. And so ergot happens to be this kind of fungus that grows on any grain, like rye, or it'll grow on wheat and things. And so it looks like little mushrooms, really. And so this is a connection point also with the fungus that is the psilocybin mushroom. And this is so the mushrooms have a structural relationship, psilocybin, with LSD. And so it's a wonderful coincidence that it was Dr. Hoffman that discovered them both. And so this painting, there's a lot in here. There was the 5-HT2A receptor that Julie mentioned, and I love that approximation to the love kind of neural circuit too,
Yeah.
That's so cool. And this is this crown on of Eleusis, which is above the psychedelic dawn of this painting. It was after I finished this painting that we got the call from Lucius to come and speak over in Basel, Switzerland,
That's right.
and come
Teach.
to,
You did a workshop there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when we went over there, he had a gift from the Hoffman family.
Lucius Wertmuller.
Lovely and wonderful Lucius. And he had gotten a hat. I think Albert is out there. Thank you, Albert. And he's helping the psychedelic community. And this is his way of saying, hey, I saw that, man. I'm going to give you a hat, a crown. So this is a relic, what some would call a second-class relic, which means that it's something that someone wore. And likewise, we have his glasses that his son gave to us, which are the same pair of glasses that were on the painting over here and that he wore on his bicycle ride. So these are a relic from Bicycle Day in 1943. So we're so grateful. And we also have a first-class relic, which is genetic material. There is an actual hair from Herr Hoffman in this, courtesy of John Hanna. Thank you very much. And we have a rock from Eleusis, which will be in...
Thanks to Delvin Salkinson.
Now, Albert was also a talented photographer, and the family gave us one of his beautiful photographs of a meadow. It reminds me of that moment that he...
The meadow where he remembered why he wanted to become a chemist. When he was a child, he was lying in a meadow and he thought, everything is made of chemicals.
Isn't that amazing?
And I want to learn more about that.
Yeah.
So that's what he did.
And so, they're all going to be on exhibit in the psychedelic reliquary of Entheon.
Yeah.
And this is a model of Entheon, which is under construction now at CoSM.
Yes. This model was designed, was sculpted, computer modeled by a great Oscar-winning animator, Ryan Tottle, with Alex's design, with Alex's total form that he worked with him for 2 years to design. And of course the sculptures, we have the steeple head, and we're getting the doors, the Creating a Better World doors are coming. We have the soul birds, but the rest of the exterior sculptures will happen after we complete the interior of Entheon and all the site work to be able to open to the public. And Entheon is the sanctuary of visionary art at CoSM. So as you walk into the first floor through the great Creating a Better World doors, you'll go through the All One Gallery, All One or None. And thanks to the Bronner people. And then you go right into the psychedelic reliquary, where we'll see all these beautiful, the paintings of the great psychedelic heroes and the relics and the history of psychedelics and the psychedelic great people who were willing to come out and say that psychedelics had influenced their creative lives.
Well, and in the case of this painting, that's an actual relic because Hoffman signed the back of it.
That's right.
And that was done on his birthday back in 2006.
Well, now I am going to ritually read this statement by Dr. Albert Hoffman that he said on April 19th, 2007 at the World Psychedelic Forum. Never more true than today. Alienation from nature and the loss of the experience of being part of the living creation is the greatest tragedy of our materialistic era. It is the causative reason for ecological devastation and climate change. Therefore, I attribute absolute highest importance to consciousness change. I regard psychedelics as catalyzers for this. They are tools which are guiding our perception toward other deeper areas of our human existence, so that we again become aware of our spiritual existence. Psychedelic experiences in a safe setting can help our consciousness open up to this sensation of connection and of being one with nature. LSD and related substances are not drugs in the usual sense, but are part of the sacred substances which have been used for thousands of years in ritual settings. The classic psychedelics like LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline are characterized by the fact that they are neither toxic nor addictive. It is my great concern to separate psychedelics from the ongoing debates about drugs, and to highlight the potential inherent to these substances for self-awareness, as an adjunct in therapy, and for fundamental research into the human mind. It is my wish that a modern Eleusis will emerge, in which seeking humans can learn to have transcendent experiences with sacred substances in a safe setting. I'm convinced that these soul-opening, mind-revealing substances will find their appropriate place in our society and in our culture. Dr. Albert Hoffman. His day, bicycle day. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Hoffman.
Dr. Hoffman. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. And
Thank you, Tyler.
yeah, for
And
all
thank
those
you.
interviews.
Yeah, thank you to all of our guests featured on this program, to Tom Roberts, Rick Doblin, Julie Holland, Amanda Sage. The full-length interviews for all of them will be featured at CoSM.org/live. Also, thank you to everyone who has made donations. Any donation is a stand for the future of CoSM, and we appreciate so much to all of those who have voted with their dollars to keep us going and keep this place in existence. You can join us for future CoSM virtual offerings. On May 7th, we will have our virtual full moon ceremony. You can check that out at CoSM.org and be sure to put that on your calendar. And thanks again to everyone for tuning in. This has been a really amazing event. And thank you, Alex and Allison.
Wonderful. Happy Bicycle Day.
Happy Bicycle Day.